For every news story, there is more.
So we can write the best security architecture plan, but it remains an essay until it becomes manifest on ground.
More detail.
Every time you are doing reform, even when we were doing it 2006, 2007, the question is also that it's not the right time. When will be the right time?
More than just the headline. This is News Extra on Radio Now 95.3 FM.
Russia President Vladimir Putin has visited his North Korean counterpart Kim Jong-un in a move that has worried government and political figures across the world. Agreements between Russia and North Korea include a focus on political, trade, investment, and security cooperation. And North Korea and Russia have pledged to use all available means to provide immediate military assistance in the event that the other is attacked. This news is of particular worry to countries such as the United States, which has been very critical of Russia's war with Ukraine. And some analysts have described the latest situation as a return to Cold War footing. Our guest this morning is a U.S. national security lawyer, geopolitical analyst, and investigative journalist, as well as the president of Scarab Rising Incorporated, a security and geopolitical risk strategic advisory, Ms. Irina Sukerman. Ms. Sukerman, welcome to News Extra.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to have you on. Thank you for joining us. Starting off, right, with President Putin's visits at an end, how would you describe the reactions of countries such as the U.S. and its Western allies?
Well, the U.S. appears to be alarmed by both visits. The North Korean visit is the more serious of the two. It represents a full return to the Cold War relations for Russia. Now, for President Putin, this is a step down. This is the first visit of the Russian president to North Korea in 24 years. And Kim had visited Russia previously, but at the time, the visit was considered to be of smaller significance. They talked about weapons, trade of weapons, but now we are seeing a full defense pact emerge from this relationship, which will include more serious commitments in terms of mutual defense, which could be interpreted very broadly. It means commitments in terms of weapon supply from North Korea to Russia, but also from Russia to North Korea. It could mean that the two nuclear powers could be developing joint nuclear programs or missile programs. Let's remember that the joint drone factory with Iran, the Shahid factory in Russia, has been hit by Ukraine recently, so Russia could be looking for alternatives. There are other potential concerns. For instance, North Korea is at the center of illicit trade. It is a source of exchanges with various terrorist organizations. It has developed its own significant intelligence system that will likely be looking for upgrades from Russia. And it is also at the heart of cryptocurrency heists. And Russia, of course, is looking to evade sanctions with the help of cryptocurrency. So we are looking at a range of cooperation opportunities for these two countries. But there is another aspect to it, which is China's perspective. And China benefits in the short term from creating an anti-Western alliance, which would include Russia and North Korea, not only against the United States and its allies, but also against local adversaries such as South Korea, Japan, Taiwan, and the Philippines. But at the same time, China has always looked at North Korea as its protectorate. It's been concerned about Kim as a reckless leader, and it does not particularly care for having Russia potentially develop a more exclusive bilateral relationship that could challenge China's influence in North Korea. North Korea, for its own part, benefits from the greater legitimacy provided by having an upgrade in the relationship with Russia. It benefits from the more general inclusion into the China and Russia alliance. against the West, and it certainly benefits from having a more independent and expensive foreign policy that could see it move away from China's short leash in the region. Meanwhile, the visit to Vietnam also represented a rekindling of an old relationship, but with some twists. Indeed, Russia has been the main supplier of weapons for the Communist Party of Vietnam since the 1950s. It has armed the Vietnam it has armed its allies in Vietnam again during the Vietnamese War, which ended in U.S. withdrawal. But the relationship cooled towards Gorbachev's term in office because Gorbachev and subsequently the first Russian president Yeltsin both gravitated towards China, which viewed Vietnam as its satellite state, and so while they continued to supply weapons, politically that relationship was kept much more low profile, and Putin is getting credit from the Vietnamese leadership for returning to a more politically engaged relationship.
Ms. Zuckerman, I do apologize for interrupting you, but you did mention the threat of nuclear capabilities being developed by North Korea. And I'm asking this as a preface to wondering if countries like China, North Korea, and Vietnam are not moved by the West threats. What are the chances that tensions will de-escalate?
Well, Vietnam is probably not an immediate actor in this scenario. And China has been cautious about using the nuclear threat. But nevertheless, there's always a risk of escalation. And China has been much more open about touting its nuclear program than before. It has not threatened its use as directly as Putin. And there's good evidence to believe that Putin has no real intention to engage in nuclear warfare, whether in Ukraine or anywhere else, because that would trigger an immediate, overwhelming and devastating response by NATO countries. However, the most plausible prospect of this is a conventional escalation involving North Korea. Maybe not a full-blown nuclear attack, but nuclear missiles or nuclear-capable missiles are certainly capable of significant long-range damage, even if full nuclear capabilities are not engaged. A potential escalation with South Korea could be a possibility, especially if China and Russia are seen as backing North Korea's ambitions in the region, and it would benefit both Russia and China in the short run, because even though China has been looking to mend trade relationships with Japan and South Korea, politically tensions remain high. China has threatened both countries with potential war if they backed one, and it was also clearly stated that Russia and North Korea would join that front. And Russia, of course, would benefit from any escalation because that would distract from the war in Ukraine, and it would strain U.S. and NATO capacity in both the South China Sea and in the area. U.S. did deploy additional carrier towards South Korea in response to recent escalations, but signs are pointing to North Korea slowly preparing itself for potential military escalation. We've seen the degrading of the strategic communications between North Korea and South Korea. We have seen the unraveling of various agreements and a preparation for militarization. So all signs are pointing to the fact that might be the next theater of war.
I believe it was a couple of years ago that we saw the North and South Korea attempt to establish some sort of relationship where their leaders essentially shook hands across the border. And you said that we've seen a de-escalation or rather an escalation of tensions since then. Is there a possibility that the U.S. or even Europe will approach not official, whether unofficial or official relations with Russia, with North Korea, with Vietnam, which you say is a lesser threat? Is it possible to engage them in a way that is not combative?
Well, Vietnam is the most promising of the three, and indeed, Vietnamese leadership has been developing trade relations with the United States, which makes Putin's visit all the more curious and controversial. Because on the one hand, Russia is engaged in energy projects, which, by the way, challenge China's territorial claims, and Vietnam and China have been trading barbs over a territorial dispute, and the Vietnamese Communist Party leadership trade in Moscow rather than in China. But on the other hand, Vietnam does not want to be confined or defined by these relationships, especially after the perceived failures of Russian weapons in Ukraine. It has been broadening its defense trade to Japan, South Korea, the Czech Republic, and U.S. has been approaching Vietnam over purchasing American weapons in a move to try to woo Vietnam away from China and Russia. But that has been met with some distrust and skepticism due to the concern that U.S. Congress would block such trade, such purchases over human rights and democracy concerns, leaving Vietnam stranded. So they welcome Putin's visit, but I don't believe they're very likely an immediate threat to the U.S. They're quite concerned over Chinese territorial claims, and they also wish to diversify and not be dependent on Russia. So at the very least, they're probably more of a gray zone than a direct risk. With Russia and North Korea, it's far more complicated. North Korea has made no secret of its intention to retake South Korea as by force and down the road. It's looking to expand its role. It's been testing its nuclear program, and it has been a threat. It's been acting as an intermediary for various terrorist organizations, and there's a very aggressive intelligence actor and hacker around the world. Russia, too, has basically announced a completely adversarial approach towards NATO countries. And I don't believe that the political philosophy driving Putin and the ideologues around him is going to be open to any sort of permanent compromise or deal making, even if he is putting forward seemingly peace plans over Ukraine. I don't believe that in the long term this is something that he would abide by.
Ms. Sukerman, thank you very much for your time and expertise on this conversation. Irina Sukerman is a U.S. national security lawyer, geopolitical analyst, and the president of Scarab Rising Incorporated, which is a security and geopolitical risk strategic advisory. And she joined us on News Extra to speak on the visit of Russian President Vladimir Putin to North Korea and Vietnam in the last week.
We are intentional about the stories we tell and the language we use in telling them.
Intentional about the people we speak to and why we speak to them.
Because here at Radio Now 95.3 FM, we aren't just telling any story.
We are telling your story.
And your story is all that matters.